This morning's Dharma talk is titled Radical Meditation. Radical. What does that mean? It doesn't mean outlandish. It doesn't mean disturbing. It doesn't mean rebellious. It comes from the Portuguese Hawaiian word radix. Nobody's arguing with that. Radix, radical, the root, right down as low as you can get. Even the root is extra. It's above the actual root. But you might have to go in that direction. Going in that direction is it's difficult to teach that. It's difficult if you understand that. It's difficult to take what you understand and convert it into language in such a way that it doesn't get in the way of the person you're trying to teach. Not easy. I often say to anybody that will listen or that looks like they're listening, you know how that body language where they go, well, this is a Cocker Spaniel, and they're just trying to upset you or get their picture taken. So how do we go to the root of our situation? When you go home, just before you go to sleep at night, there you are. Here you are again, going back to bed, or here you are again, getting up in the morning. Kind of the same person, but not exactly. If dreams are coming up or not. Some people don't remember their dreams at all. That doesn't mean they don't dream. Just it means that somebody else is probably remembering them. So, all the different kinds of meditation there are. Deity yoga, mindfulness, closing your eyes, scanning the body, satipatthana, I think is a fancy word. Mindfulness awareness, shine and laktung, shamatha vipassana. Did I say that? No. So I think I'll blow my nose again. Radical. So the way radical may look for any one of you could be quite a bit different. The attitude should be the same. The attitude, go to the root of it. Find whatever is happening with any of you, whatever kind of emotion or feeling or disturbance or happiness for that matter. Anything that is happening, if you want to investigate that, which if you're in this room, you're a meditator, so you're probably interested in finding out stuff. Especially if you're having a difficult time and you have all these suggestions coming to you. I have a suggestion for you. Train your mind. And how do you do that? You see the way your mind is untrained. It is not comfortable. It's radical. You sit down and what you're doing is you're not abandoning anything, but you are concentrating on, excuse me. I have a leaky, what are those? Sit down, hold still, and you will, if you don't do anything but just observe, just receive, just very simply, through all of the sense fields, including the mind. The mind doesn't get some kind of special consideration here, nor are we trying to get rid of it, like some meditation practices. Well, you have to stop thinking. So label thinking, return to the breath. Not wrong. It's not wrong. Some people, that's the kind of meditation that's going to help them. They may need to start there. But the way I teach this is the way it's been taught. As far as I know, I wasn't in Japan in the 12th century. But as far as I know, this type of meditation is really taught everywhere. Teachers of various ilks find ways to, if they see what this is, in order to transmit that or help or serve or support others in their path towards sanity. Might teach this in a different way. How do you, using those words, path towards sanity? You have to look at the sanity. And how do you look at the sanity? Look at the insanity. You have to look at it rather than cover it up, leave it, abandon it, meditate it for that matter. Do anything with it. Don't add anything onto it. How do you know if you're doing that? You won't. Well, there might be some symptom like, I think I'm screwed up. I feel very lonely. This isn't working. That's a real good sign. If you've been sitting and for weeks and weeks, months, even years, and you start to think about your sitting practice, especially the way I teach it, this isn't working, that's one of the best signs on the path there is. You want a path? Receive the negativity. This is not about results. It's not about correcting. That's the mundane path. It's all about getting better, learning how to shoot what do they call those? Bone arrows? They're made of bone. So there's all kinds of training that has a very definite step procedure that is quite applicable. Is that it? Or applicable? It's one of the two, applicable or applicable, to that situation, because it's so basic and it's in this particular human realm where things look like right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, here and there, tomorrow and yesterday. Got any more of those? It's just extremely bizarre for a manifestation of the Buddha to show up in all these different ways with all of this confusion. It's, on the one hand, it's astonishingly confusing, and it's completely brilliant and is at rest. How do you find that? You have to look at the chaos. Radical. You have to look. You don't go towards your idea of the root or your idea. Not that there aren't people who teach that way, but you look at your personal. It doesn't even look like anyone else's. If you compare your meditation with anybody else's, am I doing the same thing you're doing? You're all blissed out, or you're in terrible shape, or you're bored to death, or your knee hurts, or on and on and on. So there needs to be, the way it looks here, it needs to be a radical approach using your karma, your mind. If you sit down and observe whatever's moving, this is radical. You will get no proof. If it's radical, you're not going to get proof of that. You're not going to get some kind of, I think you're doing radical meditation. Because of why? If anything is happening, if you're receiving anything, it's not radical. If nothing is happening, that's thought. That is thought. Okay. If you come to any conclusion about anything, then is it the water glass half full, or that's to do with mountains, halfway up the mountain, or if you're in the middle of the mountain, are you halfway up the mountain, or are you halfway down the mountain? Nobody's smiling, so that must not be very funny. Radical. You all know what that is. Any of you have been meditating, you know it when you sit down. As soon as you sit down, it shows up immediately. And then we start to cover it up with our ideas and concepts. But it's right there. And if you try to grasp it, it'll run away. And why does it run away? Because you have imputed, or you believe, or you judge, you jump to a conclusion that it's something. You think your thoughts are something. You don't even know for sure if you really think. If you think you think, then yeah, probably not. Yes.
You said it shows up immediately. Does that mean we recognize it?
That's a particular way of teaching it, that you'll recognize it. But I would say that radical is you won't recognize it, because it's actually beyond that. But you won't do the opposite either. You won't take a position on it at all, but you might have to take a lot of positions over the next 10, 20 minutes, 10, 20 years. You might have to take a lot of, come in, sit down into your zendo, your shrine room, your meditation hall, your bedroom, your closet, your front porch, your back porch, the back of your station wagon. They may still make station wagons. You?
How is it that, can we perceive the root, the radical? How is that perceived? And is it perceived through this body?
No, everything is perceived up to that. Everything is perceiving this, now you're perceiving that, then you're perceiving this. And if you don't do anything with it, then it just keeps moving that direction. It's like walking into a woods. It's like walking into a mist. It's like walking into long days journey into night. Just the title alone is enough to let you know you don't even need to read that book. I have often said, and I'll say it now, if the book title serves their content, then book title's enough, especially if you're radical. I don't believe that.
Is there a root?
No root, and nor is it the other way. There's no position on any of that. But we need to have something. People are suffering. I'm suffering. I'm not different from anyone here. There's a differentiation, and there's conclusions and exclusions, but there's no solid being. That's the difference. That's what you have to see. When I say you have to, you don't have to do anything. Do whatever you want to do. Practice kung fu. Practice something you're really good at. That usually feels good. Notice that? If you're really good, especially if there are people watching. I think they can tell that I got this down. That's the interesting thing about meditation is that when you're meditating, you'll even impute what people are thinking about as they're looking at you while you're meditating. You notice that? That's called narcissism. Narcissism. I want to be able to say that as a ventriloquist because eventually I'm going to have a dummy on my mouth. I think I already do. It's a dummy. This is a dummy. Any position on anything is not radical. And the idea of radical meditation is about the journey. It's about the path. It's not a conclusion. You won't come to a conclusion about it. You won't need to. There won't be anyone to conclude anything. When I say there isn't anyone, your own presence in this world might become radiant. Or not. You might become sour grapes. Or what was that sour smell in the hallway? You ever find out what that was? Who made that sour smell? Shoka? Good boy. Yes.
I forgot.
Okay, so didn't I have a piece of paper? Yes. So I wanted to, and I might murder this, but if I do, then you can feel superior. Radical meditation. The reason I'm saying this is because even the words, not only different people, but to teach this radical meditation, French is, I'm going to murder this. and I listened to it, so I meditatio radicale. Is that correct? Who speaks French? Meditatio radicale. Is that? You speak French, Tom? No. Would you like to learn? Let's see if anyone recognizes this as another language. Amuldia. No? Did I get it wrong? You don't know? Okay, I thought you would know. I think that's, is it Gujarati? Well, I'll try another. How about Hindi? You know Hindi? Oh, let's see if you know this. Katir Pantidian? No? This is embarrassing. Let's see, I'll go to English. Chinese. Don't have anybody speak. Anybody? Would you know? No, you don't know. Chinese is Xi Jinping Xiao. I think that's pretty close. That sounds pretty close to that. Anybody want to correct me?
Yeah, that one was good.
Huh?
That one was good.
Was it? Thanks. So I had some other ones, but well, let me try Spanish. Are you getting impatient?
That's Spanish.
Who speaks Spanish? Let's see. Yeah, there we go. There's Joseph and Tanya. So Spanish would be meditación radical.
Yes.
Meditación radical. Ah, sí. Sí. Okay, enough of that. So what I'm using that model for is there's a whole lot of other. I really kind of like language, but liking something doesn't necessarily confer talent. So what I'm using that for is to say that your person, that your way, that there's different languages. Each person's karma, the causes and conditions that brought you into this world, and they were giving you a hell of a hard time when you were 11 or 12, or in the 4th grade, and dealing with other people, other little tiny humans like you were. Those remember those years? Remember when you were 6 or 7, how difficult things could be, or maybe how fun? All of that stuff is getting to know yourself as an individual. This is what's happening with these little people in the back. Getting to know yourself. It's a really interesting situation. And if you're interested in training your mind to see clearly, then start where you are, as the Pema Chodron's book title goes. Start right here. Sit down. Get to know this. Don't object to it. Don't agree with it. Don't look away. Don't object. Aggression, one of the 3 poisons. Don't agree. Passion, one of the 3 poisons. And don't look away, distract yourself, or get up and leave. Ignorance. That's the way we uncover our own natural, or our original mind. The mind that is not separate from anything, anywhere. That floor and that universe. Not separate. Not the same, but not separate. It's an astonishing thing to begin to realize that you can actually be upset and happy and miserable, and that all this is welcome. Everything's welcome to come in the door. If you start to object to some things and agree with other things, you're just building a little tiny machine we call suffering.
Is our original mind able to recognize?
Original mind doesn't do anything. It's along the path things are recognized or seen. But that's just a lot of talk to get you to keep practicing. That's why Trungpa Rinpoche said, my teacher said, no guarantees of anything. No, you just need to do this on your own. You're alone. You're alone. You start out by being lonely, and then eventually you see you're alone, and you don't mind.
A question from Hakaran.
Yes, Hakaran.
What does seeing whatever shows up do for us?
Not much. From the point of view of a gaining idea. But it's whatever shows up. If you're sitting still and you're training your mind, which the way to do that is to sit down and receive. And what is functioning as an obstruction or as a difficulty or a success or anything that comes up will start to show up just as a form in consciousness. And what is confusing is we look at the form as something arising in something else. But you have to do that for a while. You have to look at the separation in order to see that nothing is separate. Just like you have to look at the confusion or the ignorance or the difficulty don't fix anything. You have to do that before you can see the fundamental purity of that. Everything is fundamentally pure from the beginning. Nothing has ever existed. That's what it says on that scroll as you come in Tokonomo. From the beginning, nothing ever was. It's just saying that there's nothing separate. Yes.
If the original mind doesn't do anything, what manifests?
Your ideas about it. And they can come and go. It's the mistaken identity that has the issue with things. It objects to some things and agrees with others and has no interest in the other things, passion, aggression, and ignorance. It's an imputed self, so there is no solid self. But you have to see that. You could say, who's talking? Who's talking here? Who's talking there? Same thing.
Are our ideas different from arising and passing away?
The arising and passing away is just the fluidity of the whole thing. The ideas are Depends on if they're happening to someone. So what happens, what strengthens the ego mind is grasping at right and wrong. This is not right. Like the commercial, isn't there a commercial now that somebody will be taking a shower in a shower with a carpeting on the wall, and somebody says, that ain't right. They're trying to sell something. Interesting that the commercial did not work, because I don't know what they're trying to sell. So the judgment, anytime anything arises, is not that you can't have that a negative feeling wouldn't arise with it, but that's just spontaneous, and that's fine. But what will happen was we'll try to correct something. We want to step in and modify or shift our situation. There are people teaching this all over the internet and are happy to take your money for it. Again, it's not wrong. It's just something people are doing that causes them to go in circles instead of going right directly to the top of the mountain and to continue to go. Questions are good if you have them. Yes.
A question from Susan. What was it that brought you to Zen from Tibetan? Dzogchen versus radical meditation? Just asking about your experience on differences.
Yeah, I haven't left anything. If you mention Dzogchen, or you mention Kagyu, you mention Shamatha Vipassana, you mention, or I haven't left. It's just the teaching of the Buddha. It just shows up in all these different ways. It's like a banquet, but you have no appetite. I saw one smile for you food eaters. Yes, sir.
When I think I understand something, is that a distraction?
Could be a distraction, but it might be just ignorance. I mean, it might be a shutting down. Anytime you conclude anything, even if it's validated by the proof, the science, and Johnny Carson, I couldn't think of the other guy. Even if it's validated by things, it's conclusions shrink up and shut down on awareness. If something needs concluding, it will happen out of causes and conditions, out of pratitya samutpada or dependent origination. Everything that is here that looks like it's stationary is moving all the time. It might be just very, very slow. It's called decay.
So is there anything that's constant?
So constant is a relative term. And as soon as you set up it's constant, it has to be compared to something. So it's neither constant nor is it inconstant, unless it's constipated. Then it's probably got problems. I don't deal with those. Well, somewhat. No, not really. Enough of that poop humor. Let's go to something else, please.
I'm glad you didn't go to incontinent. I thought that was the next.
Yeah.
You had to go there.
Well, if I was on another continent, I would. But you're always on the continent you're on. You can't be on another continent. Have you noticed that? I mean, I would like to be, huh?
Thank goodness you're here. Appreciate it.
Thank goodness you're here. That's Hindi, isn't it? Thank goodness you're here. Thank goodness, yeah. Thanks. How about some really intelligent questions? So I could pull out those dive. And I'm not correcting myself. Don't accuse me of that. Yes.
What is radical about training our minds?
So to use a visual image, we're everything has been created and apparent, and we're here and we're living our life, and we got through primary school, we went to high school, maybe we went to college, and we're moving, we got married, we have children, or whatever is happening, things are going on, and they're somewhat circular, they're going this way and that way. And we tend to try to use that samsara, that spinning of the mind, we get pretty clear about that. Sometimes we even become psychologists or, auto mechanics. We get very clear how to do certain things and keep going, and then we impute this person who continues to go and to go and to go without any investigation. And then we realize when we're maybe going to the hospital, or we get, because death comes without warning, suddenly it looks like your life is coming to an end. You realize you missed something about this, and so we're not sure what it actually is. But what is missed is you don't really know who you are. So therefore you think you're going to die because you're identified with your body. We think this is us. If you think this is you, it's going to be hard. Might not be hard right now. You might have really good health, be living for another 2 or 3 years before that comes without warning. So radical means to find out who this is, so you have no more questions about anything. When I say no more questions, I'm not saying you don't want to know what's for dinner, and that's simple things, but you fundamentally you understand this, and it's not a conclusion. It's an astonishing situation to not think about anything. But you can't do it by stopping thinking. You can't train yourself to stop thinking, because that's a part of the consciousness. You might as well be plugging your nose or holding your tongue so you can't taste anything. I'm not going to taste anything. It's a new kind of yoga. There are practices that are weird like that. Like,
how does a simple mind live relatively?
it's not separate from it. So everything functions just, you don't refute anything. You don't necessarily accept anything. I'm not saying you're not really attached to banana cream pie. I certainly am. I think about it often. And on my birthday, I'm going to have some, along with a couple gallons of insulin. So things are still coming and going, but they're not happening to an individual that objects or agrees or has a problem. It has no problem. It doesn't mean that you don't get a toothache and it hurts and you take medication. Or you have acid reflux, which I do. Thank you, by the way. She brought me some, what kind of pills were those?
Enzymes.
Oh, yeah. Somebody was joking with me. They told me it was lysergic acid, diethylmide 25. I said, that's a joke. You didn't say that, did you? Not sure what to say right now. Mm-hmm. That's how I do this. What are you guys doing here?
You have been talking at the fridge for about half an hour now.
I'm talking at the fridge. I'm looking at a refrigerator. Is that without the R, just refrigerator to save energy? What else do you have to say for yourself? Yes?
No question.
Ask your question, please.
Does finding out who we are satisfy us?
I think the idea of satisfaction kind of goes away, and you have a deeper realization of what that is. You don't become, if you become anything, you just become ordinary. You don't become a special person. Although in order to teach this, in some traditions, they build the teaching person up. Look, look how high in the air I am. I'm on a tan. I'm a Zen guy. More? Further questions? Sato?
If we're observing what comes up and I guess endeavoring to see the root, will there just be one thing, or could it be a lot of stuff that comes up and could be considered root?
So radical meditation isn't necessarily about seeing the root. It's using that concept to go towards an assumed source for everything. But you to say it literally, you won't find anything. But that no finding is finding. It's not a conclusion. You just understand that. You understand the Buddha's one of his basic teaching is pratitya samutpada, dependent origination. That there's no solid self in the skandhas. There's no solid being. Even though we feel like if something goes wrong, we feel like it's happening to me. If something goes right, we feel like finally I'm having some success. We double up on everything to build and reaffirm someone who's doing much better or someone who's not doing so well. Extremely complicated. So there could be some of that showing up, and what I would say is if you're sitting down, holding still, endeavoring to hold still, and endeavoring, use that word, to just observe, to give everything your attention, whatever sense field is the strongest or weakest or whatever, give everything your attention, and begin to notice the nature of consciousness that there isn't anyone there doing that. And there's a feeling of somebody calls my name, I respond. So there's some kind of connection happening there, but it's very slight. And it's not necessary. And it causes horrible suffering in the world for people to have strong opinions, ideas, things that we're even taught. You should have opinions. You should do this and that. You should be not take any crap off of anybody and those kind of things.
A question from Susan in Traverse City.
Yes.
Is noting relationship as it is a method of moving toward understanding?
Noting the relationship as it is. I'm not sure how, but just whatever's happening, that's what needs to be happening. How do you know? It's happening. So, and then our ideas about it, those are also happening. But keep it simple. Whatever's happening, add nothing on. No interpretations. You could say just having a feeling of not, like in post meditation or after you get up off the cushion, not particularly knowing what's going on is fine. It's sometimes looked at, from the ego point of view, it looks like a feeling of going backwards. You feel like you're might be doing something wrong. That's why it's necessary to have a Buddha Dharma Sangha, teaching community, yes.
A question from Joseph in the other room. What is the have to in don't do anything unless you have to?
Well, the fancy word for that is patience. Sit still, watch what moves, rather than trying to make things move or push on things to get away or get things to come towards you. I'm not saying you won't do one of those two, and from someone else looking at you, they might think that you're just like anybody else, pushing and pulling and ignoring and so on. But your intention or attitude to be with all things as it is might show up in different ways, and it might take a while for you to begin to understand through awareness the way you have a priority about things. You have to see the priority. You have to see the subtle judgments that comes up that keeps you from allowing things to come and go by laminating ideas and concepts on top of them that slow them down and seem to work to gives us the illusion we're in control of our world. It's just not helpful in the proverbial long run. But what is helpful? Train your mind. Sit down, hold still, see what this is, and stretch or strengthen the observing part of the consciousness, which has innumerable parts. Read the Abhidharma material, and you'll see that. You find out they're just full of parts of everything. It's like looking at the inside of a golf bag, maybe. That doesn't work. Thanks. It would if it was full of bumblebees. Then it would be complicated. It's like that. Things are going this way because everything is cooperating. Even if it's through some kind of difficult area, there's still the cooperation started back here somewhere. Then causes and conditions bounce off from each other until you get the apparent present situation. And then what is ignored? What is ignored is that is not separate. It looks like a bunch of separations, like. Any more questions? Yes.
A question from Greg in the UK.
Yes.
It is said we are creatures of habit. Are the thoughts me, mine, I just habits? If so, what's left?
So the way I would respond to that would be say, look at, rather than try to stop them or try to manipulate them or do something with them, actually just look at the habits that come and go with no addition, no subtraction, without anything else, and then see if you can register that there's a spaciousness that is there, that those arise in and fall away. We tend to grasp onto the thing to push it, or grasp onto the situation to inflate it, or grasp onto the situation to get rid of it. But you could just observe that coming and going in the mind, like clouds in the sky. It's like thoughts in the mind stream, and the mind stream or the awareness is just it's just about observing that happen, observing that coming and going until you understand deeply what that is, and it wouldn't necessarily agree with anyone else. I wouldn't, if you talk to other meditators about your meditation, not a good idea. Keep it to yourself. And when I say that, I'm not saying can't share ideas or, every day. We talk about the Dharma constantly. Someone might bring up something in the middle of that has to do with their personal meditation. But very good idea to just be alone there. Be together, Sangha, but be alone. I think Trungpa Rinpoche used the image of people walk together in the path that nobody leans on anybody. This is called, starts out as lonely, and if it ends up at all, it ends up as being alone.
Does there need to be an intention to see the root? Is any sitting radical meditation?
I think each person would use that differently. Some people this might not even feel particularly helpful, just not be helpful. So I would say, whatever you're doing, if you're doing a meditation completely different than what I'm saying, I don't know what you should be doing, but you do. So you might sit down and you might use that, just like some people sit for longer periods than others. That's why we don't have scheduled walking meditation. It's a Zen temple, monastery, but from my experience over the last number of years, I'm not saying you shouldn't do walking meditation. Do whatever you want to do. The most important thing is to sit still and observe what continues to move. That's the basic instruction as I understand it and teach it. But getting up and doing walking meditation is, even though it's called walking meditation and bringing meditation into action, I don't agree with that. I don't disagree, because some people may need to do that. But if you're talking to me, I'm probably not going to encourage that. At the same time, I would say if you want to get up and walk around the room, you should do that. It shouldn't be somebody up there with a bell telling you when to do that. That could, because it's structured, they've gone too far with the form, and that form is about control. And I'm not about controlling anybody. I'm about getting you to see what your mind is and to stop fighting with yourself. Be genuine. You might have to feel crazy for quite a long time. And the craziness may never go away. What goes away? Nothing goes away. Nothing changes. You should ask questions about that. I'm saying things that don't make any sense at all. Kyun? This better be a good one, Kyun.
What's radical? Nothing changes.
How's it look to you? That's it. My goodness, you got it. Did you get it?
If there's suffering that arises, and we see it arise, and then it goes away, and we see it arise, and it goes away, and we see it arise, what's radical?
What sees that? Who sees that? You just went this way and this way and this way. There was some kind of continuity there. But the imputation is that someone sees that. Find out if there is someone. Even seeing no self is just, you're still not to the top of the mountain. Using a mountain as a metaphor.
Is there a continuity that's not a self?
So that's a teaching device that there is, continuity. Like the word sutra means suture, and the word tantra means thread or continuity. So what is it that has the continuity? Because that's separate from the continuity. Or is it? For a minute, I thought you understood what he said, just by the look in your face. But then you started smiling. I thought, you missed it. Yes.
A question from Susan. Shikantaza is a physical posture container that quiets down impulsivity in my experience. Isn't this quieting of impulsivity a kind of doing?
Yeah, you're meditating. You're sitting down to meditate. But if Shikantaza is quieting down impulsivity, you need to meditate more, because you're missing the dark woods. Not you, but just using you as a stand-in. I'm saying that you need to do more of it. Because if you're just getting quieted down, I mean, it might take a few months, few years before you actually see the confusion radically that you've been covering up for who knows how many lifetimes. Don't believe a word I say. You're here so you could listen, you could consider it. But if it seems like malarkey, I occasionally use Sanskrit words. You have a question?
Yes, from Sanho in Oklahoma.
Sanho.
What does radical meditation look like at the hardest times in our lives?
That when it's the hardest time in your life, if you're in Sanho, Mountain Phoenix is his name, and where do you think he got that name? What does a phoenix do? Comes out of that. So just look at it. Don't add, don't subtract, don't divide. Just the attitude would be, which is this may work and to give you some kind of understanding, may not, but just be willing to feel that way from now on. Have a willingness to not fight with anything. And of course, in the Bodhisattva vows to be with all things, to save all beings, put others before yourself. That's hard because of the concept of that looks almost like some kind of humanitarian thing, and it is not. You can put others before yourself and go to a mountaintop and never come down. Milarepa stayed in his cave, the Tibetan saint, yogi, songwriter. Other questions? We have 5 minutes left. Or we can leave.
What does it mean to put others before yourself?
See that there isn't anyone. It's a statement that is a very relative statement. That means find out who you are. Find out who wants to be special. Find out who wants to emphasize their suffering. Find out who is it. Is there someone there that actually wants something? So that's to clarify that will show you how to relate to others because you're fundamental. It looks like you're separate from others, but you others are accessed through your consciousness, not by going out into the world and not that there aren't ways. The 3 ways, which I'm sure you've heard of, are to support others through giving them money or food or support or shelter, protect them that way, to protect them from danger, to encourage them to be brave and face their situation if the occasion arises where they're open to that kind of help. And then the 3rd way is to teach them the Dharma, if they're open to it. Yeah?
When you use the image of a root, I get the image of a tree. And it seems like we can't see the roots. They're completely covered. What covers the root of what we're trying to look at?
Lotus root, not tree root. Does that help? If the root was in the sky, would that help? Okay, then look at it that way.
From Gyokudo up in Minnesota. If we awaken, will the desire to be somebody no longer show up?
I'm not saying that is some kind of guarantee or something. It may or may not, but you won't be concerned with it. It's just like suddenly you look in the mirror and you see feathers coming out of your head. You think, that's odd. Not even a bird. So you'll be aware of it, but you won't have too much concern. You'll notice that maybe jealousy comes up in this open dimension, which your life has become. And if suddenly you hear anybody say that they no longer suffer, that they're totally at peace, and you should look around the corner, see there's a lot of red flags coming out of the ground. Anybody that makes any claims about some kind of wonderful, successful situation is separating themselves from you. Anything more about Roots? It's also a pretty good movie. Any questions from people over in the northern gate? Yes.
Why do we want to separate ourselves?
So the separation, the desire to separate, just like the desire to join, is for security, and it's security for someone. And we've got all these nerve endings and all the six sense fields, including the mind, that are very sensitive. And so those are meant for navigating a human realm or a three-dimensional realm. But what happens is because of causes and conditions, we get loaded up by things going haywire and through a lot of suffering. So we want to get away from that. And that carries over into a situation where everything's going along perfectly fine, and yet we still have that desire to get somewhere else, get something else, something else, something else. There isn't anything else. When I say there isn't anything else, I'm not saying we're all one, but I'm saying there isn't anything else. So look at the desire to do something else or to go somewhere. Another way of saying that is so you can find out who you are. So you can find out your true nature. And this tradition is called Buddha nature. There are other traditions that may have other names. Should I go through these names again? Brad, you're not smiling. There, that's better. Further on that, it's a good question. Any other questions?
How does one recognize that someone is open to the Dharma?
That's a good one. If they ask you a question about it, is one thing. So I understand, so you could ask me a question like, why do you meditate? Say that.
Why do you meditate?
Helps keep me honest. And then if they don't ask any more questions, well, offer nothing. Make them drag it out of you. You know what I'm saying? I don't mean drag it out of it, but make sure that you have a receiver for what you're, like if you're not doing it with that person. I'm not talking necessarily about convincing them, but respond to their questions so they actually, when they talk to you, they're actually getting the fundamental connection where the communication is happening. What?
How do we teach something that we don't understand?
That's the only way you can teach it. As far as the spiritual path, if you understand it, you're dropping back down the mountain and you're teaching people how to mow lawns. Not wrong. Maybe that's where you need to be. But if you want to teach somebody how to see what this fundamentally is, then you have to be talking out of that and out of the mowing the lawns at the same time. Not two. You can't find two things anywhere. If you find two things, get a slip of paper and see if you can slide it between them. Kind of a dumb metaphor, but works, yes.
So, like, if confusion arises, like if I find myself in a situation where the Dharma is being brought up and the ideas around what I think I know about it come up, how can I still be helpful?
Start by shutting up. I say, if they insist, then you can continue to go, but make sure that you're riding on their energy of inquiry rather than your wish to get them into the Dharma. It's very disrespectful to do that to someone. People need to be respected in their confusion and in their sanity, their brilliance. Like if someone were to say, people have said this on rare occasions, so do you think I should practice meditation? I say, no, what do you think? I don't know. Well, I wouldn't do anything unless you have to. And I mean it. Yeah, and sometimes someone is a different religious, if they're Christian or something, different path, and respect them, leave them alone. Try to, not that you would, but I'm just saying, They might want to know about meditation, but you need to see their intention, and you can tell their intention by the nature of the question. Their intention might be to be friendly to you, to show you that even though they think you're in a cult, but they don't dare say that to you because they think you're a really nice guy. So they're just going to kind of fish around there and see if you're going to try to get, you're going to try to get me into his cult. A friend of mine from high school, years and years ago, he says, it's really an interesting thing about you. Called me Bob because that's my name. Is you going to try to get me to do what you're doing? Does that mean I don't want him to attain enlightenment because I want it all for myself? It's just be really respectful of that and watch people's boundaries. People they're invisible unless you understand the structure of their mind, the way they come and object and agree and object and agree and look away. Object, agree, and look away. Most people are doing that. If you're not doing that, then you're not meddling with them and you're respecting their confusion that they need to awaken. This is not a belief system. If you believe this, you might need to believe it for a while, but at some point that will go in the scrap heap. Yes.
Can you see somebody's intention without necessarily having content show up of, this is what this person wants?
Yeah, you can feel that, sure. Especially you. Some people aren't as sensitive as you are. That's not a compliment. That's just an observation. Oscar.
So back to Diogenes' question.
Yes.
You said that you won't be concerned. Who won't be concerned?
What was your question?
Yes, about realization. And if you realize, then would be radical or whatever be of interest. And I think you said, yeah, it might show up, but you won't be concerned.
So it might show up in consciousness, but it doesn't belong to anybody. There's no ownership. There's no territory. There's no separate territory from anything else. So therefore, there isn't anyone to be concerned. And it's not that even the concern might show up, but it gets no oxygen. It can't live unless you agree with it, disagree with it, or look away from it. It can't. Everything is apparently separate gets its energy, its apparent individuality, its separation, singularity from those three poisons and from dependent origination. This has been going on since the beginning of this time. So there won't be an identity. There might be some kind of a feeling, but that's also dependent about. I wonder why I don't feel this, or I wonder why I felt this a few minutes ago and now this is dissolving, or I wonder how I can get that feeling back of not caring about anything. I wonder how I can get that feeling back of feeling really good, of having a really good meditation. If you came to me and said, I had a really good meditation today, it would depend. Some people I would say that's wonderful, but most people who live at the monastery, I would say, oh, that sucks. Looking away from your suffering again. Dharma humor. Yeah, I'd start if I had to do that for a living. That's why we don't charge anything. Yes?
When you use the concept of stillness, is there suffering in stillness?
Yeah. As long as it's a concept. There isn't anything but stillness in movement, and there isn't anything but movement in stillness. It's again, it sounds like, oh, that's another one of those who knows kind of thing. But you could use those and go into those with some sincerity. Look at stillness and see how it gets the conceptual, look behind the conceptual understanding of something being still. You can't have stillness without motion. You can't have sound without silence, even if you aren't Simon and Garfunkel. Are we at the end of our sojourn? Very good. Thank you so much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our chant books. I'd like to remind everybody about the donation boxes in the hallway. We depend and appreciate your financial help here with these teachings, this teacher. Also like to remind everybody that tomorrow night, Monday night, Sokuzan will be teaching at 6 p.m. at the Sanctuary Yoga in Kalamazoo on the second poison, which is aggression, and then again Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock at Unadorned Lotus studio in Grand Rapids. So join us there if you can.
May the mirror of this penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize with us way. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
O Buddhist Bodhisattvas, the 10 directions, and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light to protect SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.
Also going to be